Well, good afternoon. This is Friday, February 19th. It is episode 63 of the Bob and Bill podcast. Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Good. I feel like we can't get any further apart.
I know. This takes social distancing to the max. But it's going to be fun. We're actually recording today in front of a live studio audience.
That's right. Our couples retreat is just about to end this afternoon, about 12:30, but we've had an amazing weekend together.
It has been great. Scott and Lisa Mitchell have been here from Marriage Rocks, and they've done a great job, right? So you guys give them a big hand, and I want to invite Chaplain Juan Mendez, Allie Lang, and Diera Mendez, if you will join me on the platform. Diera didn't know she was coming up here. I didn't know Diera was coming up here until just a couple minutes ago. So what we want to do in the next 45 minutes is talk a little bit about what God's doing in the ministry. We're going to talk about addiction recovery. We're going to talk about what God has been doing during the pandemic as we have navigated through our events, and hopefully it will be informative to you. Wow, I've not sat this close to you, Allie, for a long time. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay, good. So Allie Lang is representing Barbara's Place today, and Diera, you met last night when she shared her testimony. Diera oversees the ministry of Enrich. And for some of you that have been here for a long time, Enrich was women of character, but there's been a lot of things that have morphed into that big umbrella of Enrich. And then Chaplain Juan is the director of Colony Mercy. From food service to Colony of Mercy director, it's only God. In fact, there was a grad that came this week for Men's Fellowship Night, and he said to me, well, who's now leading up the colony? And I said, Chaplain Juan Mendez. And he said, the food service guy? And I said, wow, if you only could see the transformation that's taken place in his life. So let's talk a little bit about what did life look like at Barbara's Place and the Colony of Mercy before the pandemic hit? We'll start with Allie.
So before the pandemic hit...
Just turn your mic on. There you go.
Can you hear me now? No? Oh, now you can. Before the pandemic hit, Barbara's Place did a lot. They were very active. They were very much a part of the community and the different churches that we were a part of. We did different events. We went to church services down the road. We did housekeeping at least 2 to 3 times a week, which took up a huge chunk of our time. So we didn't spend as much time in classes because we were doing a lot more outside things. We did a lot of events here at America's Keswick. We were part of everything that went down over here. And we also had a lot of volunteers that came into the house. So we had people who came in to watch movies with the girls. We had people who came in to teach them how to paint, teach them how to cook, teach them how to bake. We had a group of women who did crafts with them on a weekly basis. And so they had a lot of interaction with the community, a lot of people coming in, and a lot of going out to different events.
How about the colony?
Well, we measure it in quality and quantity. First, quantity. Each department has a maximum of beds that we can have. So if we think about internship, we usually have around 2 interns. At that time, we had 4. And so we had to create some space around property. That's what I love about the ministry here, is that when we see a need, we adjust to the need. So we had 4 interns. And when you think about discipleship, we usually have around 10 at that time. 10 is a lot, actually. I think we had 12 and some on the waiting list to come in to internship, and every colony bed was full, which I think at that time we had 39 beds, and the waiting list had grown. You probably say with this the epidemic it should be full, but a year before that we were struggling to keep the beds full. And so with the staff and with the Lord, he just amazingly brought people in our lives, because we can't minister to empty beds. And that was the mentality. We can't minister to anybody if they're not here. And so we launched out, and God blessed us in that way. But, quantity, that's quantity, but quality. What I've noticed is that the guys were asking to stay longer, meaning that they were asking for 30-day counseling extensions. and they were signing up for discipleship to go through trauma care, like they on their own. Like we were just put it out there, the information, because we don't force anybody. We put the information out there, and they were chomping at the bit to sign up. We started thinking, now what do we do? We had a problem on the other end because the guys really wanted to grow, reach in deeper in their walks with the Lord.
One of the things that we have heard over and over again during our 123-year history is that God always goes before us. In fact, Deuteronomy 31:8 is our theme verse. And we saw God go before us in so many different ways, including we weren't really sure whether we were going to be able to keep the colony in Barbers Place operational. We knew it was very plain that we couldn't operate the conference ministry, we couldn't do our retreats. But the question was, can we still do Barbers Place and the colony? And I was coming home from doing a funeral, and the Lord had reminded me of a man that goes to a church that works in the state of New Jersey, and I called my CFO, Alan Beltley, and I said, you know what, it would really be helpful for us to know for sure, for certain, are we essential? We think we are, but what is the governor's position? Well, this guy happens to work for the governor. And he called, and within 5 minutes he called back and he said, from Governor Murphy's lips to Bill's ears, America's Keswick is an essential ministry for the addiction recovery. Keep it going. And so, while I may not agree with everything that has happened in the state of New Jersey, that one decision was pivotal because it allowed us to continue to minister. So, talk a little bit about what it looked like as we were going through the pandemic. Because everything changed, how we did things. Families for Christ changed. The higher ground and flourish and all those things changed. What did that look like?
I can start. Essential. Bill, last time I checked, it was 74,000 overdoses, the last recorded by the CDC with opiates. Just opiates alone. Millions of people struggling with addictions, isolation, shutdown, quarantines. How many of you know that is not recovery? I mean, we fellowship, we build into relationships. So, essential. We couldn't pause recovery because COVID was here. We couldn't say let's put the pause on recovery and focus on COVID. It just can't happen. People were struggling. The epidemic was here before the pandemic was here. So it's just like, let's everybody stop using because, and so as a team, we decided that it wasn't whether we were going to open up, it was moreover, how do we open up and do it in a safe way? And so the team got together with all the recommendations from the CDC, with prayer, with a multitude of us just thinking through what others are doing that are similar to us, and doing and structuring the best as we could, as in a time we knew it, a plan to. So it looked completely different. CDC when COVID came, guys were going home, family members were calling them home. I mean, it was. I'm looking at Joe. I forgot Joe was in the. So some guys stayed and went through the course, so I praise God for them that just kind of stayed the course. But it was strange. The world was strange. The program was strange. Everything was uncertain at the time. And so we created a program after we realized that we needed to open, that it wasn't an option for us to just completely shut down. And so we created a program where CDC says you need to be quarantined. So we have a quarantine section in our program where guys that come in and they're stabilized for a certain amount of time until we get negative tests as we monitor their system. And so they have their own section even before they cross over. So in that section, they have Bible study, they have devotions, they have DVDs and movies training so they can just keep them abreast until they move over to population. So it looks a lot different because one of the things that we didn't know is that the colony had around 60 people running around on campus all together at one point with interns, disciples, and and colony full. And when you got that many people on property, you have 20 of them that are stronger or further in the Lord, and they help the newer people. But when you only have 15 people in a program, and all of them are new, because the guys that were in the program started phasing out, and we wasn't taking new intakes. So we had all brand new people coming in recovery at the same time, and they wasn't really strong enough to kind of build into each other. It's relational, and they wasn't strong enough to build it, so we were having mass exodus. And so that's one of the things we're still working through. We thought that if somebody agreed to come into stabilization, all the parameters, we just assumed that they will be sold out for the program. Well, let's just say it threw us a curveball.
So, De'Ara, with the Ministry of Families for Christ, it could have been that totally crippled that ministry because we weren't allowed to bring the couples in. So
Sure.
you started to do it virtually, and there was a really cool story about the very first time you did that.
Yeah. So when we realized that everything was shutting down, I looked at Juan and I said, well, what's going to happen with FFC? And he's like, I don't know. And this was probably about a month before the next one. We had just had FFC and everything stopped. And I was like, well, do you think we could pull it off virtually? And so we just started planning. We had no answers. And by the time that we offered it virtually, that first month, we had 30 couples, which is about 60 people on Zoom with us live that month, which was pretty amazing. We had one couple the husband was in the military, and so he was logging in from somewhere, I think in Florida, and then his wife was in the Midwest. We had a graduate couple that joined us from Puerto Rico, and then we had a couple of other grads who were like in Boston and California, and it was just really interesting to see how we were able to keep doing the ministry, and it actually opened the doors for folks who would not normally have been able to come to property and be ministered to actually join us and still get the experience of being an FFC. And that has actually continued. The virtual aspect is now a permanent part of FFC, which has been really helpful. We just had a couple who the wife was in the Philippines while her husband was here, and she was able to participate and be ministered to as well.
It's pretty amazing what the enemy thought he was going to get a victory. God said, now you watch. And instead of suppressing ministry, the doors have really opened. So some people think that all we do is the colony and Barbara's Place, but there's so much more that takes place. So we had New Creations, we have Flourish, we have Higher Ground, we have Love Them to Life. Juan talked about the isolation factor, and you cut the support out, but we were able to continue to do those ministries. How did we do that?
Absolutely. So technology has really been our friend. I know for years we always talked about how technology is the enemy, but in all honesty, it has been, we call it of the devil, right? But honestly, it has been our saving grace in this last year. So now all of our groups are offered both in person and virtually. We did end up, when numbers started to rise again, we moved back from meeting in person, but we still continue to offer all of our support groups virtually. So Higher Ground, which is for women who are struggling in addiction, New Creations, which is the men's support group. We also have Women of Character, which continues to meet monthly on a virtual and in-person basis, as well as discipleship groups, which do different Bible studies for the women, which we continue to offer in person and virtually. People were really chomping at the bit this in September to really get back to face-to-face, and so we did our best to find rooms where we could social distance, still instituting temperature checks and masking, and allowing that in-person interaction. But then, as time went on and we started to see, especially the spike after Thanksgiving and the holidays, we did not shut down. We just went back to virtual meeting, and we continue to do that on a weekly basis. And the men and women, they show up faithfully. And it's really just great to see how we're able to at least keep some of the fellowship going, because many of them share that their churches just are not able to kind of withstand all of the changes. And so some of them have really strong relationships in their churches where they are getting what they need, but there are so many more that this has literally become their fellowship with believers.
So Allie is Jim Lang's wife. Jim is our director of guest services, and Allie, how many years have you been at BP now?
I've been here, I think, about 2 or 3 years full time, but substituting for about 4 years.
Okay, and Barbara's Place is going to celebrate a birthday this month. What birthday is it?
I believe we're at 6.
Okay, that's good. Which is amazing, right? I have to step back and think for 30 years we went through the process. It was on, it was off, what you're going to do. And now that it has happened, it is just amazing. So what makes the Barbara's Place ministry is a little different than the Colony ministry? What are some of those differences? Unpack what a day in the life of Barbara's Place looks like.
Sure. So Barbara's Place starts with the girls getting up around 7:30. They're down by 8 o'clock to have breakfast, which they prepare themselves. It's typically like a buffet kind of style. At 8:30, they each take a chore, which is how we maintain our house and make sure that it stays clean, make sure that it stays suited for all the girls who are going to be there. At 9 a.m., we get started on our classes. That's probably one of the main differences between the Colony and Barbara's Place, and a huge COVID positive for us. We spend the bulk of our time in classes. I mean, these girls are just immersed in everything biblical and everything relational. And so they begin with devotions, and then they just move into a whole bunch of classes. We do codependency classes, safe people classes. We talk about God's grand story. They do trauma counseling, 2 different types of trauma, actually. And so the bulk of their day will be spent there. They have time to do some of their homework in the afternoon. And then around 4 o'clock, they're going to get some free time, and that's where most of them will spend their time outside. They really enjoy walking and use that as a healthy coping skill with all of the work that they have to do. And then there's typically an evening activity that they're going to do. They do Higher Ground on Mondays with De'Ara. They use the activity center here on Tuesday nights, which gives them an opportunity to do something physical, whether that's in the pool or in the gym. And then they have movie nights and game nights, of course, because we have to balance out all the work that they have going on. So that's probably one of the main differences between BP and the Colony, and again, a huge positive from COVID. We also have been able to, since COVID hit, make use of a lot of the free virtual conferences that have been going on around the world. So conferences and events that we would have had to pay money for previously became free and available to us because they went virtual.
So you used the word trauma. One of the things that's exciting is that the core message that William Rawes began this ministry with is still the core message. But one of the things that I love about this team is that they're willing to grow and to see other ways that God can come alongside of men and women in recovery. And so the 3 of you, let's unpack what you've learned about trauma in the life of a man or a woman who is struggling with addiction.
Well, all 3 of us experience it, know it, understand it in a lot of different ways. But to say it in a basic way, it's wounded. Many of us are walking around wounded in certain areas. And we realize that they were like co-occurring issues. We can deal with the addictions, we can deal with the substance. But even before the addiction and substance, when we go back into their history, we realize that they were hurting individuals before they picked up the substance. Primarily, people who use substance are escaping some of the pain, numbing some of the pain, medicating some of the pain that they don't want to feel or even talk about. And so what we did is open our eyes to some of these things and inform and help and support in many different ways as they go. So the guys, as they go through trauma, we inform them that this is a thing that could be going on in your life, and we kind of partner with them when they recognize it, that, yeah, this might be something I want to talk about. And so we all have been trained in different ways to be able, actually, Ali and I are in the same trauma master's class. We'll be finishing together in May, right? We'll be finishing. And so we got a little bit trained and get some skills to be able to work with them. And I get this question all the time. It's like, I love Jesus. I've been walking with the Lord, and somehow I end up back in these places. And a lot of times we just started asking those questions with them and come to find out that we just have a lot of wounded Christians walking around. I mean, nobody even talked about it. The Vietnam vet, you think about extreme versions like PTSD. They came back, they just called them shell shock, get over with. And they were hurting. And so years later, they realized that there was more going on in those vets and those soldiers. And that's how we learned that civilians go through the same wounds in different areas of life. And so we just want to help them and support them as much as we can. And we use the gospel. Nothing that we do is absent from the gospel. So we know that Jesus is the one that's going to heal them. We just create systems that can present Christ in those ways.
So at Barbara's Place, we do 2 different types of trauma groups. The first one is P3, where they process a person, somebody that hurt them, and we name that person the perpetrator. And then we do a T2S group where they process the substance itself as a perpetrator, because we want them to understand what that substance has done to them. We break it down into different stages, but one of the crucial stages is from the story that they tell, we tease out the core beliefs that they now have. So they begin to believe things about God, about themselves, and about others that becomes detrimental to their ability to live a healthy life. They believe that God is distant. They believe that God is cruel. They believe that others are not there for them. They don't care. They believe that they are worthless, that they have nothing to offer. And so we tease them out so that they can understand that these lies have been driving their addiction. And we help them rewrite those lies and to begin to believe the truths. And that comes straight from Scripture. All the Scriptures that talk about that they are a new creation, that they have worth and value in Christ, that God is good, that God is loving, that God is ever present. And we begin to teach them to believe these truths and to rewrite the lies. And we also give them an opportunity to mourn the losses. Some of the stories of these women, they lost so much because of the trauma that they went through, and they never got a chance to grieve it. They never got a chance to even really admit what had happened. And so we give them that opportunity to say, yes, I lost this, and this was hard, so that they can begin to move forward and begin to create from a solid foundation.
And for the ministries that fall under Enrich, particularly Women of Character and things like Higher Ground and some of our discipleship groups, we use a trauma-informed care approach just because our ability to work with the women and the men who are coming in from the community is a bit more limited. And so while we don't necessarily process specific traumas that have occurred to them, we operate from a mindset that we understand trauma is probably at the basis of what they've been through. And we help them to see connections between things that they may need to go back and look through and how to cope with what is happening currently. We do have one particular group that I lead that is for women in abusive relationships. And that specifically, while it's not a processing of the abuse, it is an abuse recovery approach where they begin to understand what has happened to them, acquire language that they can talk about the situation, and then learning new skills that they can learn to cope, even though they still may need to do more in-depth trauma counseling around the things that have happened.
Well, I want you to thank Juan and De'Ara and Allie for sharing today. Thank you so much. Continue to pray for these 2 ministries. One of the things that has been a major part of what happens here in America's Keswick is our summer Bible conference. And we weren't sure this year, Bob, whether we were going to be able to even do that.
Right. It was iffy for quite a while, and then we would make a plan and adjust that plan and adjust it again. That was quite a process coming into that time.
And finally, the governor said we could do 100 people. And so we thought, we don't know whether anybody's going to come, but I want you to watch. This is a little glimpse of what summer looked like here at America's Keswick. all broke. I mean, think about this. Everything came to a grinding halt. No guest groups, no conferences. And the cool part about our team is, like, it was like, what do we do? And so Robert had come to me maybe a couple weeks before this, and he said, we don't play very often now at this time of year. We don't sing very much. And so we started the Worship Live. It was really Joyce's idea to do the Worship Live podcast, and I think we're currently recording the 211th broadcast. And so every day, Monday through Friday at 1:30, we do Worship Live. We started a bunch of podcasts. Tell them about the podcasts.
We did. So everything really happened very quickly. At the beginning of March, we had a full spring of groups scheduled for our weekends and a full summer. And within the first 2 weeks of March, that kind of all disintegrated. We started getting calls from groups early in March, concerned about what was going on. And then that second week of March, limitations started to get put on. And then all of a sudden, the whole spring was now canceled. And so we started to think as a team, how can we still minister? No one's coming to our property. How can we still spread the message of Jesus Christ? And so we sat down as a team and we just came up with ways that we can have touch points with people who support the ministry every single day. So Monday through Friday, we had ideas on how we could put out a podcast. So on Mondays, my brother, Chaplain Noah Lang, he did a study on Revelation. And on Tuesdays, Lynn Wilson from the front desk, she did a women's Bible study called Hope for Today. And then on Wednesdays, originally it was Bob and Bill were doing two podcasts, one on Wednesday, one on Friday. Now it's the Recovery podcast on Wednesdays. And then Thursday was the Ripple podcast, which is a testimony podcast, just allowing people to see that we're still, Christ is still changing lives here, and hope is still being realized. And then on Fridays was the Bob and Bill podcast. So every day, those videos were posted, and people were able to still stay connected to us, still find the hope that is found here. And so what we found is not only were people who knew about Keswick touching base with us, but we were getting a whole new audience of people who had no idea what we did here.
And our seniors who squawked about using their cell phones and texting their grandkids and getting online discovered very quickly that if they were going to survive, they were going to have to figure out how to navigate this. And so we're really excited about how many people engage with us. Now, some of them will watch live when we're actually airing the podcast, but a lot of them will go back and watch later. And one of the things that happened is that these are the folks that began to support the ministry financially when we didn't have anybody here. Everything that we've done has sort of been experimental, and we didn't really know how it was going to work. So, like, you're enjoying the takeouts. I mean, it was either come up with a way, because for summer, we weren't allowed to have anybody in the dining room. We weren't allowed to do inside dining. And so all of our meals had to be served in takeouts, and everybody had to eat outside. But we sort of did a dry run for that.
Yeah, pretty much every week we waited to see what the governor was going to do, and as he opened things back up, we came up with plans on how we can then take that and serve in a new way. And so when takeout dining kind of got started, we were like, well, how can we use our kitchen, use our food service team to serve the community? And so we started serving 3 to 4 meals a week, and it would just be drive-in dining, so people would come to our front door. We would have the meals hot and ready in a bag, just like you're getting them now, and they'd just come, and we'd give them the bag, and they'd drive off, and that really kind of shaped how we were going to serve throughout the summer.
And Robert, summer was going to look really, really different for us because, again, we were limited to 100 people. We made a decision as a team that we didn't feel like we could do children's ministry the way we used to do it and do it effectively, because we got a lot of young kids that serve in the ministry with all the guidelines that the CDC wanted to impose upon us. So what did the meetings look like? Because we did have a lot of our young families come and bring their kids.
Yeah, the meetings were held right in this room, socially distanced, and we were very careful about that. There were temperature checks as you would come in, and so it was an odd feeling, but people navigated through it really well. And then we ordered in little packets of craft type things that went along with our theme and had a biblical attachment to them that the kids could be working on throughout the message. So the kids sat right here in the messages, and they heard the Word of God, but they also had something to help reinforce. And their behavior was exemplary, and they really navigated it much, much better than you would expect kids to handle it.
And James came alongside and offered a lot of really cool.
James Serpico was amazing this past summer, and meeting with each kid as they would come in, he would go to each one and built relationships with them. And then when he would run the activities in the afternoon, they already had a bond happening, and it really made the week really fun and very special, I think.
So as we moved through the summer, we were looking at our Labor Day weekend, and you came to me one day and said,
So all summer long, we had a limit of 100 people in this room, and it worked out pretty amazingly. The amount of cancellations we had, each week we were right around 100. Week 2, we were a little lower, but each week we were right at that 100 threshold. Well, I guess by the end of the summer, people were just ready to do, and so we still had well over 100 people registered for Labor Day weekend. It was pretty much the week before, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this extra 50 people? We can only have 100 people in this room. So we started to brainstorm, make plans to live stream it in the fireside room and have people watch in there, and then how do you choose which people are going to be put over there? So we were really just kind of scrambling to figure out what we were going to do. And then pretty much 2 days before the conference was going to start, we got word that the capacity got increased to 150. And so it was such a God moment, and a lot of stress lifted off my shoulders.
So this year's family, so we did most of our events online, hymn sings, girl talk, spring ladies day. We had our family freedom walk planned, and it was like, well, now what do we do? Well, could we do an online family freedom walk, which was obviously going to look very different? What was our goal this year for the walk, Robert?
So we actually had an incredible goal this year, 2020. We were asking to raise $115,000. That's what we were asking God to bring in.
Big goal for us. And so imagine we go from having all of these people engaging with us, walking around on campus, to now we're doing it online. The Colony Grad Band provided music along with Robert and Joyce. And what did the Lord do within an hour and a half?
Well, the 115 that we had come up with, that we were asking the Lord for, that was before COVID. And then after that, what he actually brought in the day of the walk, we ended up with $167,000. Praise God for that.
Only God. Only God. And Katie, you oversee the ministry of Beyond, which is our ministry to the next generation. And again, we probably could have seen that whole change, but what did God do as we began to filter through the Beyond ministry?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Beyond is a night where we invite local youth groups to come in, and we have a message and worship, and we play a bunch of games, and the snack shop's open, and it's a really fun night, and kids really look forward to it. And before COVID, we were doing it monthly, and we had a lot of kids, and it was a lot of fun. And then when COVID happened and youth groups were shut down, and we weren't able to have it. And then back in October, we did our first one back since COVID, and we did the whole thing outside, and we weren't really sure like how that was going to work or if kids were going to be interested, but we had over 150 kids come out, which was amazing. And now we're going to have it again in April, and we're really excited to have it and be outside, and it's going to be warm, and it'll be nice.
One of the other ministries that is sort of unfolding, Robert, is everybody was, I remember when we first came to Keswick, people would be homeschooling, and you'd say, oh, yeah, that's one of those homeschool families. You've been there, right? Come on, be honest. Well, homeschooling all of a sudden has become the hot button because everybody's doing virtual ministry. Schools weren't opening. You were having to do virtual. So let's tell them what's happening as we're moving forward.
This is actually an exciting week. On Wednesday, we're going to be hosting for the first time our Keswick homeschool open house. Just to introduce America's Keswick to our homeschool families that live in the immediate area. We already have 150 or so signed up, And we're excited about being able to offer extracurricular options for them. Things like environmental science and photography and some craft classes, some art classes, some physical education classes. And Joyce and I are going to be doing music theory and choral track for them, and we're hoping to implement a drama track as well. And one of our speakers is going to be doing, he teaches in a college level comparative religions, and he's going to break that down and simplify it, but offer it to high schoolers and their parents. And so we're really excited about the things that America's Keswick has to offer to students. And then, in thinking about building relationships with those students, they could eventually be our summer staffers or lifetime staffers, and building into those families that would be guests here on a regular basis. So we're pretty excited about what God might be doing through that. And we're looking for ways to have people on the grounds. Bill always says you can't minister to empty beds. So when there are people here on these grounds, that gives us the opportunity to present the gospel to folks who need to hear.
Okay, so we have an event on Wednesday, which is sold out, so if you want to come, you can't come, which is really kind of cool. So what is that going to look like moving forward?
Well, we're going to try one semester, and what that means is we're going to meet 6 times. So March, April, and May will meet the first and third Wednesday of each month, and we'll offer those classes, and they're age graded, and we'll try out a semester and see how it goes, and then talk about moving into the fall.
So how can they get information about that?
Well, you can call 1-800-453-7942 or check out our website, but you can make reservations online. Just because 150 are coming this Wednesday doesn't mean that all of them will opt to come for the classes. So if you have homeschoolers that might be interested and you live in the area, just call in, because there might be room in some of the classes for your kids.
And we're excited that the governor, I think we're going to see more and more things begin to open up. 2 weeks ago, the governor made it possible for inside dining to increase. We are very unique. You all know that we're unique. There's nobody else in the world doing what we're doing in terms of combining addiction recovery with conference ministry. And so one of the weird things is, what are we? Well, we're a hotel, and there's been no restrictions on how many people can come to the hotel, but we're a restaurant. And so I'm very grateful that we were able to at least get inside dining up to 25% so that we could have you in the dining room. And another sort of aside from that is, if COVID hadn't come, we had planned to redo the dining room, but because we couldn't have anybody here, it enabled us to really do a great job in the dining room. I think our staff did an awesome job renovating that property. But now we're able to increase our number. We can actually serve 210 in this room, which is going to help our hymn sings and our girl talk. But we can only have 150 for a meeting. So I've decided that at every meeting we're going to serve the Lord's table, so that we will be able to serve a meal, and then that gets the meeting up. Don't tell on me, please. Hey, would you thank these folks for sharing? I'm going to ask, thanks. I'm going to ask Robert and David to stay with me. I want to just sort of, and Robert, obviously, Bob, you're not going anyplace, right? So in the midst of a pandemic, we have no guests. We have addiction recovery in process. I told you last night, 45% of our revenue is generated from people who come to use our facility. So the revenue stream completely stops. But God has done exceedingly abundantly above and beyond all that we can ask or think. We did not have to lay any staff off. We did not miss a payroll. All of our bills have been paid in full. When we were trying to decide, are we going to even be able to say we ended the year in the black? And I told you last night, we did. That is a miracle, guys. I mean, that's only traceable to the hand of God. In the midst of a pandemic year, the Lord brought in the money to put in a generator, which will go for the Ross building. Lord willing, that will be here in the next week. And I'm hoping that once we get the generator, we'll never lose power again. And so we probably will not have to use that. But the Lord provided over. Do you remember how much the Lord brought in for the generator?
Yes, our project. We needed the generators because the summertime we had an incredible God story. We realized we had a need, and we need generators. And so we started asking our partners if they would consider supporting us in the hopes that we can get a generator, some generators. And God actually brought in $58,000 to help us with that need. And right now, we already have one of the generators. They should be putting it together soon, correct?
Yep, this week, which is pretty amazing. So, like our year-end appeal, which God did something really special with that.
Yeah, our year end, we were looking at our budget and seeing where we were financially early on before the end of the year, and realized that we were facing a deficit, quite a large deficit.
$275,000.
$275,000 is what we needed to end the year in the black. And we started to ask our partners to consider supporting us and helping us to land in the black. And God has shown up again in amazing ways at an incredible, weird time in our life, right? 2020. And God brought in, at our year's end, $248,000 plus.
I've tried to document all of these stories because what we say to each other almost every day is, you can't script this stuff out. This has been a faith ministry for all these years, and this year we've really learned what it means to live by faith. A payroll every 2 weeks here is $68,000. And it's like, God, what are you going to do? How are you going to provide this week? Robert had an unusual situation happen because a friend of the ministry wanted to give us a stock gift. That's one way that folks can give, is donating stock. And tell them what happened.
So a friend of ours of the ministry had shared with me that he feels God was leading him to give this gift of stock. And that's always good news. We have a lot of expenses. We need support. And he was willing to come alongside and help us out. And he said, I'm going to give you $400 shares of this certain stock. And I'm thinking, okay, 400 shares, that's great. And I went and looked up how much it would have equated. It would have been, that day I checked, $120,000. It's incredible. I'm like, wow, thank you, And so he started the process of transferring this stock to us. And we have something in our bylaws that you want to share?
Well, in our bylaws, if the day that we receive a stock gift, the stock gift has to be sold. So we were watching Robert and Dan were watching the stock market and seeing this stock go like this. And so the question was, what happens when it comes? Can we, as a board, make a decision to hold on to it till it gets better? Well, our CFO, the day that the stock arrived, our CFO was sick, so he wasn't here that day. And the stock that day was like here. The day after, when he came back to work, what happened?
Well, just to lead up to that, our friend who gave this stock gift, he doesn't use a computer, because if he did, he could have transferred it immediately. We could have got it $120,000. But he's old school, and he wrote a letter. By the time the letter got to his broker, they made the transfer, sent it to us. It got to our portfolio. Our CFO got sick. When he shows back up to work, as this stock is slowly declining down and down, and then God shows up, and bam, there was a huge spike the day we received it, and we ended up getting, you ready for this? Over $140,000. So that mistake was a $20,000 plus.
So we obviously, like your church, we work with an auditing firm and we go through an audit every year. One of the best practices that an auditor does, they will ask us to send letters to everybody who gave a gift of $10,000 or more. In 2019, there were 16 letters that went to people who gave $10,000 or more to the ministry. And those 16 people gave $274,890, which is amazing. Amen. This year, we sent 24 letters to people who gave over $10,000. Those 24 people gave, are you ready for this? $639,083.18. So now that's the end of 2020. January and February on a normal year are our worst months because giving dips off after the end of the year giving. Guest groups aren't coming as frequently. We had a large group of youth ministry kids that were coming in January. They moved to another facility, so we weren't looking at anybody in-house for January and February. So, God, what are you going to do? Last week, I came into the office, and I was checking my mail on Saturday, and there was a letter from an executor of an estate. This estate came from a lady that served the Lord for almost her entire life. She died in her 90s, missionary. And when you looked at this lady, you did not ever anticipate that this lady had anything of worth earthly value. She prayed every day for all of our staff, and for every conference she went through and prayed for every guest. This lady was a prayer warrior. When she died, she left 4 organizations $150,000 each. And so it was about a year ago, we got our first $50,000 gift. And this Saturday, I signed the paperwork. Because it had taken so long, there was interest on the $100,000. And so we're going to actually get $117,000. That was Saturday. On Tuesday, I came into the office and I had a card. Kathy Withers had been working with a partner for 3.5 years. And she had a family member that died, and she wanted to give a portion of her inheritance to this ministry. She's 78 years old. She sent me a note. We hadn't heard anything. She's been here, and you want to go up and say, hey, what's happening, but we didn't. And she sent me a card, and in the card she shared with me that she came to Keswick. She's 78 at age 11. At age 12, at the summer conference, she gave her heart and life to Jesus Christ. Her uncle graduated from the Colony of Mercy, and he's buried in the Keswick Cemetery across the street, right across from Pastor Bill Raw's. So she was writing to tell me that the estate has finally settled and the final paperwork is going to go to the bank. And she said, I wanted to let you know what God was going to do for America's Keswick. We're going to get 2 checks. We don't know when they're going to come, but I do know this, they're going to come exactly when we need them. Okay? The first check is for $25,727.96. The second check, we should have a drum roll. Yeah. The second check is for $478,649.10. I came back to my office after sharing that with the staff, and there was an email from a pastor. His church closed, and they made a decision when the church closed that they were going to divvy up the proceeds between the missionaries that they supported. We are one of the missionaries. And he had just signed the paperwork for a gift for Keswick for $90,000. Now, here's what I want you to know. So think about this. Some of you are mathematicians. A payroll is $68,000 every 2 weeks. My board were like, we got money. We can spend the money. Well, you know what? I said to them, we're gonna plan, but we're also gonna wait, because we don't know what the next 3 or 4 months are going to be like. I just know, because of what I've seen God do this year, there's going to be a need, And that check is going to come exactly on the day that that need is going to be there. So what I want you to say is, we don't need you to stop giving now because we got $400,000. God knows something that we all don't know, and it's going to be exciting to see. But again, we just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the way that you have prayed, and many of you have given sacrificially. We want to continue to tell you your first responsibility is to your local church. Before you ever give to a ministry like Keswick, your first responsibility needs to be to your local church. If God blesses you over and above that, then consider giving to ministries like America's Keswick. David and Rob serve on the partner care team. And quickly, David, you have a heart for ministering to pastors.
Yes, I've been here almost a year and a half now. July will be 2 years. And I just want to say, yes, continue to support your local churches, your churches that you do go to, and also support the mission boards, because the mission boards have an opportunity to sow back into America's Keswick. I just want to really ask everyone to continue to be praying and to continue to work with your local churches, and to pay attention to when they're asking for mission giving. That mission giving goes a long way. I had an opportunity to speak with a older lady. She was widowed, and she was giving $5 a month. And I looked at what she had given at the whole period of time, and she asked me, well, my $5 really doesn't matter. And I shared with her how much that she had given at the point of the time, and she was in tears, and she thought, I thought it didn't matter. Every penny counts, because what we get an opportunity to do is to sow into the men and the women of America's Keswick and into the addiction recovery ministry, and it is making a big difference. Lives are being changed, and that is what my heart is, to be a servant, is to come here and to serve and work beside Bill and Robert, and to Robert here. It is a blessing to be able to come here and to just be able to speak to all of the pastors and to the church mission boards, and to be able to share what America's Keswick is doing and the updates.
And a number of our partners that are here this weekend are visionary partners.
I just want to share, as I look around the room right now, and I see a lot of people who have been impacted by the ministry at America's Keswick. And Bill, you read that letter. There was 2 different parts of our ministry that had made a huge impact on these people's lives. One was the Colony of Mercy, freedom from addiction, amen. There's many people in this room right now, Colony graduates, and I could stand with them as a former heroin addict myself, and praise the Lord for America's Keswick's ministry and addiction recovery. But then also the other lady who had got saved at 11 years old, coming to our ministry and hearing the gospel message. Our mission in life, never mind just here, our mission in life is the furtherance of the gospel and in the advancement of the kingdom of God, right? And you all are making that possible. Many people, if this is your first time here, I hope you're able to see the work that God's doing here. The people that have been coming here forever and supporting us. And being visionary partners is a program we have of people that give monthly. And there's many people in this room or watching right now who are visionary partners who give monthly. And I just want to say thank you. Because as you hear stories about these gifts that we're getting, it is good, but we have a lot of expenses, as Bill mentioned. And so for that, we're very grateful for all of your support. And if you're not a visionary partner, you can see me in the back. I'd be happy to help you set that up. But we do need help. And as David mentioned, $5 makes a huge difference. If you consider 12 months out of the year, that's $60 in a year. So for as little as $5 a month, you can help support the ministry at America's Keswick. So thank you.
One of the ways that you can help us is pray. And in your packet, there's a copy of the prayer calendar that we send out every month. If you're not receiving that, we try to give you the good, the bad, and the difficult. Inside, it gives you the calendar so that you can pray every day for something specifically for the ministry. There's a little card in there if you would like to receive the prayer calendar. If you wouldn't mind filling that card out, and then when we take the offering this morning, drop that in, we will get you the prayer calendar. The other way you can be praying for us is obviously we want to be sensitive to, as God opens up the door and opens up the property, what are the things that we can do? We've been very grateful that the Lord has kept us safe from the virus. We had a little outbreak at the colony in December, but it was like contained very quickly. But, we're grateful for God's protection. What does he want us to do as we're moving forward into these next months, particularly in our summer season? The other thing I want, Zach, if you could put that picture up, we're looking at, today I felt my age. I'm 66. And when I left the Ross building this morning, I felt 66. Because I'm thinking, I don't want to break my hip. And so I have been walking the board now for the last 10 years through, we got to start thinking of what's the next stage for America's Keswick. I would like to keep working till I'm 80, but, I got to be realistic. And so at our December meeting, we put together a succession plan, which will be 4 years for me. We're excited about that. God's got a plan, God's got a purpose, and we're trying to walk through that process. But you need to be praying for our board. Our board has to begin to look for younger men and women to serve on it, because all of our members are very faithful, but they're all getting old. And this is a snapshot of the next generation. And a lot of the things that have taken place during the pandemic are because these folks were willing to dig in their heels. What I'm not saying is anybody that's older than that doesn't have value here. But they're the ones that have energy. Zach and Tyler and Jesse, when we said, let's start podcast, they didn't know how to do any of this stuff. And yet God gifted them to be able to become producers, to do the editing, to do the recording, to get that all scheduled. And so be praying for our staff, be praying for our board. I believe that our most exciting days are yet ahead, because this is God's ministry. It's been that way since 1897, and by his grace, it's going to continue to be that. So I want you all to turn around, and would you thank the folks that are watching our podcast today? And Robert, as we bring this to a close, give them a quick update of what's happening with you.
Oh, this coming Sunday, we go back to Atlanta for a CT scan, and that's when they will determine how much the chemo has impacted my tumor on the pancreas and in my lungs, and then they will proceed further with treatment, or maybe God has put me in remission. Maybe the tumor's completely gone. I don't know. He knows, but we're really grateful for all of you praying for us and remembering us before the Lord.
So for those of you that are watching the podcast today, we want to remind you that you can connect with Robert two ways. He has a Pray for Robert Hayes Facebook page. He also has a Caring Bridge page, Robert's Life Song. And we appreciate you watching every day, Monday through Friday, 1:30 Worship Live, 2:30 the various podcasts. Next week on the Bob and Bill podcast, Ray Pritchard, who is going to be here this summer, is going to be sharing a teaching from God's Word. If you've never heard Dr. Ray preach, you need to give a watch. And again, we want to thank you for engaging with us. America's Keswick does depend on friends like you to support this ministry with your gifts and with your prayers. You can give a gift today by calling 1-800-453-7942, or you can give right on our website, Donate Now, www.americaskeswick, Donate Now. So, Bob, have a great weekend.
You too.
And we look forward to seeing you guys next week. God bless.